You're listening to the Blue Lies Podcast, where we uncover the truth about America's cops.
Imagine an America without law and order. A mobocracy where the government submits to the demands of domestic terrorists, where criminals are glorified and police are vilified. Imagine an America where good is evil and evil is good, and the fascism our forefathers died to defeat is championed. Sadly, this is our America, an America that is turning our police into the enemy. Headlines read, "Officers assaulted Birmingham," posted on social media. Criminals paid in San Francisco for not shooting anyone. NFL honors gunman who live-streamed police pursuit and shot at cops. School resource officer fired for her thin blue line flag. This is just the beginning of the war on justice and America's cops. But one retired cop is speaking out. I'm Jeff Wolf. I spent 20 years in the law enforcement community, and now I'm standing up for America's cops. Join me for the next few minutes for the Blue Lies Podcast. Welcome to episode 4 of the Blue Lies Podcast, where we stand up for America's cops. It is my pleasure today to have the Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Dave Grossman is known to most law enforcement professionals. He is an award-winning author and nationally recognized as a powerful and dynamic speaker, which is where I first became acquainted with Colonel Grossman when I attended his Bulletproof Mind seminar. He has written many books. Of these is his perennial bestseller, On Killing. Colonel, it is such an honor to have you on this podcast today. I don't want to spend the remainder of the 30 minutes reading your resume, because that's exactly how long it would take to read your resume. But you have a website where folks can go for information, killology.com, and you can read all about Colonel Grossman. He is one of the premier instructors, speakers, teachers in the law enforcement and military realm in the United States of America, perhaps in the world. He has become a personal friend of mine through this project. He honored me by writing the foreword for Blue Lies and has become the godfather of this project. Colonel Grossman, thanks for being with me today.
My honor, Jeff, and truly it's a two-way street. I'm a huge fan of your book and your work. There's nothing else like it out there.
Thank you
I've
so
been
much.
recommending it to every one of my classes now. If you want to understand why this is happening, want to get it documented and understanding, then I recommend Blue Lies. And I took a screenshot of the book on Amazon and just put that in front of every one of my classes. If they were, when an author recommends somebody else's book ahead of their own, I tell people you should probably listen. And if we could tackle America and read them just force them to read a handful of books, yours would be on that list for sure. So I'm proud to be part of what you're doing, and I'm honored to talk to your audience there. I'm a huge fan of the whole podcast revolution. When you and I were kids, we had 3 TV channels, and we had 1 or 2 newspapers in our city, and maybe half a dozen national magazines. And if you didn't get on those, there was no way your voice should ever be heard.
Right.
Now we've completely broken away that dynamic, and we've given the ability. I've been on 60 Minutes in 2020, and it didn't amount to anything. It was 3 minutes. You had no control over what they said, and a week later it was history. These podcasts will be watched for Lord knows how long in the years to come. And you've broken through that barrier. So I honor you who've taken the time and the energy to put this together. I honor your listeners who are seeking deeper levels of knowledge and talking about this topic. And we got some interesting stuff you want to bring up here as far as recent case studies that you'd like us to address.
Absolutely. Well, every week, this is week 4, for every podcast, we've established a blue lie to discuss. So
week number one was talking about the blue lie that there is no war on police, which is ludicrous. As you and I know, the NPR back a few years ago in 2016 published that article that there is no war on police. So we've debunked that. We talked to Sergeant Darren Birch, retired, whom you're familiar with, and he talked about one of his biggest cases in his career. And we just kind of showcased the heart's work of detectives and patrol officers around the country who throw everything they have into getting justice for victims. The second week, we talked about blue lie number 2, which was essentially that cops are not held accountable. We debunked that lie because not only are cops held accountable, they are being frivolously and wrongfully indicted and prosecuted. We talked to Mark Wallander, who is a retired federal prosecutor and former FBI agent, who commented and gave some insight on some of the recent federal indictment of cops that is just absolutely ridiculous. One of them being a former Louisville Metro police officer who was indicted for a federal indictment for excessive force because she used pepper balls during the Summer of Love riots, which we both know the excessive force claim there is ridiculous. And then last week we talked about the blue lie that cops are cold-blooded killers. I had Officer Josh Hilling, who is a suburb of Glendale, Ohio police officer who back in 2016 was involved in a deadly force encounter. He was charged by a man with a knife and fired one round and was able to keep distance until help arrived. So we've had a myriad of topics, and now that you are here with me, although you are qualified to comment on all of those topics, we may touch on a couple of those. I want to just first of all throw at you a couple of things that are going on recently in the news in terms of the war on police. And one of those is not far from here in Dayton, Ohio. We're in Cincinnati, of course, but in Dayton, there have been several, not in Dayton, but in Monroe, close by. There were 5 officers who were involved in a shooting involving a mentally ill man. I sent you the link when we were prepping for today's episode. And basically, Butler County, which is the county in which Monroe stands, the prosecutor refused to indict these cops for the shooting despite the family's outrage. And basically, in a nutshell, what happened was that this man who was the victim of the killing of police, of killing by police, was having some mental issues. He had an argument with his wife. He obtained a firearm. He threatened her life, threatened his life. And then when police showed up, they basically took that time to not force him into a confrontation, but to wait him out. And if you go back and read some of the articles about that particular incident, they used the time that they had on their side and they tried to wait him out. At some point, a friend came and picked him up and drove him away from his home and his neighborhood. Obviously, the police followed. And when he got out of the car with the gun, a confrontation ensued in which he was unfortunately shot and killed. And of course, the family was outraged, wanted the cops indicted, fired, put in prison, and the Butler County prosecutor said, no, the officers don't deserve to be frivolously prosecuted for taking the time and restraint to try to bring that to a successful resolution, a nonviolent resolution. But when this gentleman refused to comply with orders and presented a firearm and pointed it at officers, they had no choice but to take his life. And the family is astonished that the 5 officers are not being persecuted. Yeah. And as you and I know, this is going on, has been going on around the country for several years. And my point is, this has become what's expected. When a shooting takes place involving a police officer or multiple police officers, it is expected now especially after the 2020 Summer of Love, in which there were some very unfortunate and very unlawful deaths that occurred at the hands of police. But now it is expected that when the police use force, they should be prosecuted, they should be stripped of their authority, their lives should be ruined, and all this kind of thing. What are your thoughts on this? Where are we going with this? Why has America come to the place where we're not even willing to look at the incident before we rush to judgment?
Well, Jeff, first, let's start with understanding how bad it really is. Medical technology is holding down the murder rate. And the highest annual increase in homicides we've ever seen was 12% one year in the 1960s. In 2020, it went up 30%. So that's like 3 times worse than anything we've ever seen. But if you allow for medical technology, if you understand that we're saving lives today, and if a cop slaps on a tourniquet, saves a crime victim's life, they prevented a murder. So if you allow for medical technology, 2020 was like 20 times worse than anything we've ever seen. So with police officers murdered in the line of duty, we have to allow for body armor and tactics and not just medical technology, but law enforcement technology and backups and communication. So with police officers murdered in the line of duty, the best measure we have is what I call the year-over-year increase, the annual increase of cops murdered. 2016, 5 cops murdered in Dallas, 4 cops murdered in Baton Rouge. 2016 was the worst annual year-over-year increase until 2021. Last year, we had more cops murdered as of August than all the previous year put together. And 2021 by far was the largest annual increase in cops murdered in the line of duty. Now, when we compare it to the 60s, just medical technology alone, we have to multiply by a factor of 7. And then if you allow for body armor, double the numbers again. We think about tactics and training and technology. It's not easy to murder a bunch of cops. Think of all the things we do. The rifles we have to shoot back, the teams that respond, the backup dynamics, the strategy. So 2021, the wheels came off the bus. 2021, the homicides exploded. 2020, 2021, both homicides exploded. And the number of cops murdered in the line of duty exploded. And this dynamic that nobody in the media will talk about. They just blatantly compare the number of murdered cops now to the 1960s, and it's a lie. It's like minimum wage. Imagine I said, well, you make $25 an hour. Your grandpa made 25 cents an hour. Look how good you have it. We all know it's a lie. We all understand inflation. When they compare the number of murdered cops over any period of time, it's a lie. When they compare the homicides over any period of time, it's a lie if they don't allow for medical technology. So the point is, number one, that things are desperately bad. They're very, very bad. The point is, number two, why is the media doing this? Why do they do this? What is it all about? And I really recommend my book, Assassination Generation, to understand the media has blood on their hands. And it's so important everybody understands. Right up until the early 1960s, Hollywood and the television networks operated by a code. And throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, and right up to the first couple of years of the 60s, they operated, and the code said, we understand the stories we tell will have an impact on our society. We understand we have a responsibility to tell stories that will have a positive impact. And a lot of the code could be said in 3 words. Crime doesn't pay. Criminals will not be depicted in a positive manner. Law enforcement will not be depicted in a negative manner. And then in the early 1960s, they rejected the code. They said, we have no responsibility for the stories we feed to your children. The commercials are worth vast amounts of money because they'll influence your behavior. But years and years and years of sick stuff fed to your children has no impact on our society. So if you really allow for medical technology, every single year since the 1960s, the murder rate is up, the violent crime rate is up. And it's horrendous what they've done. And so understand this, that when we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, what we say on TV, what we dream about, what actually happens are all jumbled together. I tell my audiences, a little while back, my son, he's in his 40s now, right? He asked my wife, Did I tell you that, or did I just dream it? And she said, you must have dreamed it. You ever been there? Most adults have been there.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
with children, what's in television, what's in the dreams, what's in real life are all the same. So when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, they watch a cop do terrible things. It was real to them. I always liked a whole lot Training Day, Denzel Washington, maybe the worst movie ever made, Training Day. Denzel's a bad cop. They're
Yeah,
all bad. Most
absolutely.
evil movie ever made. Denzel Washington's a bad cop. They're all bad. And so they grew up witnessing, personally, eyewitnessing cops do evil things. And then, here's the key, the media has blood on their hands. The media is responsible for so much tragic loss of life, breakdown of our civilization. And the media is feeding this. And so the most goofy conspiracy theory in modern history is defund the police. Defund the police,
Yeah,
this fundamental conspiracy theory that cops are all evil and that the criminals are the misunderstood good guys. Rapists, murderers, thieves, they're good guys. And the cops are the bad guys. It is the most twisted, distorted misrepresentation of reality the world has ever seen. And the media fed that to them. They fed it to them because A, they believe their own lies, and B, they have blood on their hands and they have to point the finger somewhere else. So the message is, oh, it's all about the guns. It's all about the evil guns. Well, how are those gun laws working out for Mexico? How are those gun laws working out? Every single nation in Latin America has very rigid, how's it all working out for them? But now the whole gun thing is coming apart. Now they say, oh, it's all about the evil cops. If we just got rid of all the cops, the crime would go away. It is a sick, twisted, distorted conspiracy theory that threatens the fabric of our civilization. So, I talk about the sword of the Spirit and the helmet of salvation and the breastplate of righteousness. And when we talk about these things, they're about defending and protecting. And the bottom line is love. One of my slides that I do, one of my charts I do for every one of my classes, usually somebody comes up and puts dibs on it, I sign it for them. But, when we talk about why will people die, a mama critter will die for her babies in many, many species, but she will not die for anybody else's babies. Audie Murphy is the most decorated American soldier in World War II. Audie Murphy was asked one time why he did it. His answer was, they were killing my friends. So the mama critter loves her babies more than life itself. Audie Murphy loved his friends more than life itself. And the Bible says, greater love is known than this. They lay down their life for their friends. But what manner of love is this? That men and women will walk out the door and lay down their life for strangers, for people they don't even know. Audie Murphy would die for his friends, and Mama Critter dies for her babies. But what kind of people walk out the door and will lay their life down for strangers? And we've got to understand the deep power of this love they have. And so, cops ask me, why do we keep doing what we do? Why should we keep going? And I tell them that our nation is sick. This is a sickness. This is a tragic, terrible sickness upon the land. Do we abandon our family in the darkest hour? Do we abandon our loved ones? If we love this nation, if we love our God, if we love our children, we'll walk out the door and give 100%. Yeah, maybe you should leave that big city to their own devices and take your family or loved ones somewhere where you're appreciated. But maybe you can hang in there for that city. Maybe you keep doing it, and God bless you. But I'm 65 years old. It's my prayer I can keep doing what I do. I'm on the road over 200 days a year for over 25 years now. It's my prayer I can keep doing what I do for another 20 years. Every day I have the health. Every day I have somebody who wants to hear what I got to give. I'm going to walk out that door and do it. Now I've got half a dozen books in the pipeline just to try to influence events because I love my children.
Sure.
I love my grandchildren. I love my nation. I love my God. I tell my audiences, one of the saddest country western songs maybe ever written was Kenny Rogers' "You Picked a Fine Time to Leave Me, Lucille." Can I remember that one? Picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. 4 hungry children, they're dropped in the field. I've had some bad times. I've had some sad times. This time the hurt won't heal. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. The idea that a mother would abandon her children in one of their, with 400 children and a crop in the field. This is it just turns against everything we believe in. If you had a sick child, you'd empty the bank account. You start a Kickstarter fund. You or your spouse would quit their job to be with the child full time. That's what love means. So as we love our nation, we love our way of life in the midst of this sickness, we got to stand up and believe in who we are and believe in what we do. Walk out that door and give 100%. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of your book. I show it to every one of my classes. I tell them, you want to understand what's going on out there? Here it is. But what is their motive? Number one, they believe their own lies. They have fed sick stories to our children, and they believe the cops are evil. They've seen them do evil things. They've seen the movies. And one of the best things we have to fight that is putting cops in the school. If the only time they see a cop is when he arrests his dad or gives his mom a traffic ticket, then we lose. But if there's a cop in that school every day, they love that cop and trust that cop. And the school violence doubled in the last school year, just doubled to levels we've never seen before. And people don't know that. Yeah. But we have never had a multiple homicide in the school when there was an armed cop present in the building, with 2 exceptions. So never had a multiple homicide in a school with an armed cop present in the building, with 2 exceptions. One was Santa Fe, Texas. As soon as the cop showed up, nobody else died. The other one was recently in Oxford, Michigan. And as soon as the cop showed up, nobody else died. Statistically speaking, I can prove it to you. The best thing you can do to protect your children, have a cop in that school. If I were king, I would have a uniformed cop in every school, elementary, middle school, and high school in the land. And they would know that cop, and they would trust that cop, and they would interact with that cop every day. And this is the battle we're in for the hearts and minds of our children. So the media believes our lies.
That's exactly what it is.
They have to point the finger somewhere else. They got to point the finger away from themselves. They have this blood on their hands. There will be a reckoning. There will be a backlash of enormous magnitude. We've seen the media. I mean, they just killed the whole story about Hunter Biden's laptop. And now 2 years later, they say, well, you know what? I guess it was true. Well, now, and they're all admitting, well, we just buried that story. Why? They cannot deny how twisted and distorted their reporting was. And there's a backlash of enormous magnitude against this anti-cop mindset. And we've got to fight for our nation. We've got to fight for our children. We've got to fight for our future as we love our God, as we love our way of life. And love means we give it all we got. And so, again, why is it happening? Number one, they believe their own lies, and they fed it to them at the youngest age, a sick propaganda campaign. Number two, they have got to point the finger somewhere else. And thus, this lie and this goofy conspiracy theory. And the president in the national address said that, the State of the Union address said that defund the police is wrong. We have to fund the police. 99 out of 100 senators voted for a resolution saying defund the police is wrong. There was one other senator just wasn't there. Yeah. So, the Black Lives Matters people said, well, you don't have our back. Nobody in Washington has our back. This narrative that the cops are evil is sick, twisted, and we've rejected it. It is the most cowardly, gutless little politician in America should have the covering fire, should have the support to stand up and say this is wrong. And there will be a backlash of enormous magnitude. And that's why I think your book is so important, because we've got to understand what's happening. And in the years to come, we've got to be able to record and capture what has happened to our nation and where we have to have accountability. And it comes back to the sick media and this litany of lies. So all I can tell you, Jeff, is if it's bad, it's going to get a little bit worse. We've hit the end of the tide. The pendulum is swinging back the other way. We're a very wealthy nation. When things are wrong, we throw money at it. And we've not even begun to throw money at this problem. But just to you and all the magnificent men and women out there, all I can tell you is believe in who you are, believe in what you do. There have been other dark hours. And one of the darkest hours of the American Revolution was the winter of 1776. As the winter of 1776 came on, the Continental Army, large portions of them just went home. They were of all volunteer army. The next time we would fight a war with 100% wartime volunteers was in Iraq and Afghanistan. 4 years into Iraq and Afghanistan, there was nobody left who enlisted before the war. There's been no draft. Every other war we've ever had, there were always people who enlisted before the war and got stuck with the war. We always had the draft. But the last time we fought a war with 100% wartime volunteers was the American Revolution. The bitter winter of 1776 came on. A large chunk of the army just went home. They were volunteers. They had every right to go home. Thomas Paine wrote these words. He said, "These are the times that try men's souls." Stop. Your soul is on trial. Posterity, history, God, your community, they're judging you. You're on trial. These are the times that try men's soul. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink from their responsibility in this hour. Are we summer soldiers? Are we sunshine patriots? Do we just get up and leave when things aren't good? But he wrapped up with this. He said, we have this consolation. Here's the payoff. Ready? The more difficult the battle, the more glorious the victory. Your courage and your competence and your compassion shine bright for the darkness of the hour. The violence of the Old West is a Hollywood myth. The most famous gunfight of the Old West, Wyatt Earp, OK Corral, wouldn't make the state news today. Off the top of my head, I'll introduce you to 20 cops with more gunfights Wyatt Earp ever dreamed of. Gunfights that make the OK Corral, it's a pale by comparison, happening all around us. People don't even hear about it. But your grandchildren will talk about you with due cause, like we talk about Wyatt Earp. And when we come out the other end of this thing, we will be a stronger, better nation. Because men like you and the men and women out there putting their lives on the line, what manner of love is this that will walk out the door and die for strangers, are holding together the tattered fabric of our civilization. Does that all make sense? Does that tie together what you've been working on and what you're seeing?
Absolutely. And I have to say this, I have thought of at least 24 things that I could interject, and none of them would do justice to what you have said. Not very many people can leave me speechless, Colonel, but you certainly have done that. But I just do want to point out, I agree with 100% of what you've said, and I could not have said it quite as eloquently with such historical context as you have. Your essay on the sheepdog is something that has become a modern euphemism for law enforcement, and I cannot think of any better way to describe the dynamics of American law enforcement and the people whom we protect and the people who are attacking our brave men and women in law enforcement. And it leaves me with a question, as I'm sure it has left many police officers. That question being, who in their right mind, given the war on police taking place in this nation, who in their right mind would get up in the morning and subject themselves to that kind of danger, that kind of risk, and that kind of persecution? And the answer to that question is, the sheepdogs are called. It takes more than just a moral turpitude. It takes a calling to be a sheepdog. And thank God for them. Thank God for men and women who are still amidst all of the other stuff going on and the dangers and the rhetoric and the riots and the all of the junk that's happening right now. God bless the men and women in blue who still get up every day, put the uniform on, and hit the street. Because if it were not for them, this nation would, in fact, go to the mobocracy and the anarchists and those who wish to destroy the American way of life. The police are the only line holding that vicious enemy at bay. Yep.
So if you're interested, another part of this whole dynamic is the spiritual side of the house. I wrote the book on spiritual combat, and Jeff and I both would commend it to your attention to take this thing to the next level. If you look evil in the eyes, and we're in the face of terrible, tragic evil, we hate the sin, we love the sinner, we're willing to lay our life down for these people. But there's two things I want people to keep in mind. Number one, is the ability to remain calm in spite of everything that happens. And that's hard. Now, the only thing in the universe you can control is yourself. If you lose your temper, you didn't lose it, you gave it away. It was one thing you could control, and you gave it away. So I get hate mail from Antifa and Defund the Police that'll twirl your hair. They talk about what they're going to do to my family and what they're going to do to, so when I get this hate mail from these people, I can't control what they're doing. The only thing I can control is how I choose to respond. And they want to hurt me with these stuff. So if I let it hurt me, then they win. So I've got some candy that I let myself have, periodically. And when I get one of these nasty grams, I immediately go and have a piece of candy. And I almost look forward to it. Oh boy, I get a piece of candy. So I talk about that in my classes. And they say, you evil bastard. We tell you how evil you are, and you get a chocolate covered cherry. That's right. So who wins now? So I tell my cops, I want you to do this. And I like Tootsie Rolls. They're individually wrapped, so they stay clean. They're good in the cold. They're good in the heat. They stay good for a long time. They remind me of Halloween candy. I remember the big bag of Halloween candy we'd come back with. And so have a bag of Tootsie Rolls in your car. When somebody gets in your face, this is really cognitive rational therapy, CRT. It's based on sound science. When they get in your face, you tell yourself, I could have a Tootsie Roll. Because somebody was nasty to me. Every time somebody gets mean and ugly, I get a Tootsie Roll. And you take what they meant to make you lose your temper and make you lose your cool and turn it into a positive. So just understand how we can take these evil attacks. The only thing we can control in the whole universe is how we respond. If you lose your temper,
I might have to substitute the Tootsie Roll for French fries, though, by the way, Colonel.
Yeah, that'll work too, although you need it immediately. You need something you can go grab immediately. Something you can immediately put in your mouth. And by the way, it's physiological too, that once you start eating, it pulls you from fight or flight to rest and digest. It pulls you from parasympathetic processes. You're bubbling with rage, you're just barely under control. Puts a big swig of water, put something in your mouth, it sends a message that says we're safe. A deer's being chased by a wolf. He stop and get a drink. He's really thirsty. I can't get a drink. I'm being chased by a wolf. He stop and have some of that nice grass. I can't stop and eat. I'm being chased by a wolf. So the fact that you've done that calms you down in many ways. All right, now, the other half of the equation is infinitely more important. And that is being a sheepdog under the authority of the Great Shepherd. And we talk about the fact that if you look evil in the eyes, you don't have a force for good on your side. It can be really hard. And I don't understand a lot about God. When we get there, we will. I understand God about as well as my dog understands me. And most of what I do, the dog doesn't understand. But the dog knows it's a trust and obey. We'll run in the street, get run over, it doesn't get fed out in the wild. But George Will said one time, or Will Rogers said one time, he said, if you get to thinking you're a man of some importance, try telling another man's dog what to do. And you ever done that? The dog looks at you and says, I don't know much. I'm just a dog. I know this. I'm not your dog. So when the evil one comes to you, and if you're a sheepdog under the authority of the Great Shepherd, you look at him and say, I'm not your dog. And you have nothing to fear from him. See, it's eternal. You see, they can take your life, but they can't take eternity. And that's what's really important in this world. Mm-hmm. And we've been given a responsibility to do the most good we can in the time we've been given. And there is no higher good than to put your life on the line for others. Now, final point, Jesus said, greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. But there are many ways to lay down your life. Yes. To walk out the door every day in a dark and desperate hour, to do a dirty, thankless job to the utmost of your ability, because you know if nobody did it, our civilization would no longer exist. Jesus said our highest command is to love God and love others. And what greater love can there be than those who lay their life down for strangers? So believe in who you are, Jeff, and all your listeners out there, you believe in who you are and what you do. You are the sheepdogs under the authority of the Great Shepherd in one of the darkest and most desperate hours of our nation. But you believe in who you are, and I will continue to tell people about your book, Jeff, and we will continue to fight the good fight every day with the ammunition that people like you feed us. Oh.
Well, Colonel, you have put the icing on the cake for me, and I think what you have said today is a message in and of itself to police officers who are discouraged, who are under attack verbally, whether it be from citizenry or their leadership or whatever, and they're asking themselves, why do I do this? You've given them a good reason. You've given them perspective. You've helped to refocus, I think, with this message today, why we do what we do. And since I don't do it anymore, I survived to help those of us who support cops to understand why we must continue to support our police officers rather than rushing to judgment and thinking the worst like most people are doing. When you see a video from a body cam or from a cell phone cam or whatever on the news that is clipped in the beginning and clipped in the end, and all you have is the ugliness in the middle, and you immediately make a rash judgment. That's what's the media is using to drive the negativity and the indictment of the general public upon police. We have to support them. We have to get behind them. We have to understand that they are not racist killers. We have to understand that they are Americans just like all of us who want to live the American dream and are going a step further to protect the American dream for you and I. And we've got to get behind them. If we don't get behind them, if we don't pray for them, they're going to continue to take it on the chin. Colonel Grossman, thank you so much for giving me your time today. I know you're a busy man. I know you're in high demand, and I appreciate so much your willingness to chat with us today. And I hope we have the opportunity to do this again.
It's a two-way street. Iron sharpens iron, brother. Keep up the good work on
sir. Well, Colonel Grossman and I had an exciting discussion both on and off camera. And I want to take a moment to suggest to you that you go to Amazon or wherever books are sold online or in stores and find Colonel Grossman's books. Any book that you read by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is going to be filled with wisdom, information, inspiration. Anything you read, you will not be disappointed. You may be asking yourself, in terms of America's war on police, what can I do to make a difference? First of all, I want you to know that you can make a difference. Number one, support your local police department. Let them know that you support them, that you're praying for them, and that you're there for them. Number two, watch what your local, county, state politicians are saying about police and police policies. Watch what your prosecutor in your particular county is doing. And if you don't like what you see, then you can change that at the ballot box. Thirdly, you can educate yourself. You can start with my book, Blue Lies, at Amazon or blueliesbook.com. Thanks for joining us for the Blue Lies Podcast. Stay informed, stay educated, stay safe, and remember that the police officer does not fight because he hates what's in front of him, but he fights because he loves who's behind him.